We are back with Isabella Kamal, who just read a sample from the Temple of Persephone, a very engaging scene that is clearly setting up a lot. One of the things that is clear from both the book description and from that scene is that this is a story inspired by the myth of Persephone and Hades. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about where that came from for you and whether you always knew this book would be a retelling and then how you approached it.
So for me, it came from just like being a Greek myth kid as a child. You know, like you're either like an ancient Egypt kid or a space kid or a dinosaur kid. I was just a Greek myth kid because I went to like a British primary school and we had something every year that was they called like topics. And I think it was like fifth grade where they were like, we're going to talk to you about ancient Greece and Rome. And I was just so hooked. And my mom always used to do this thing where like whatever we were learning at school, she would buy me and my sisters like books to support that. So she bought us this book called like it's called like the Greek gods. It was just like a very like child friendly Greek mythology thing. And I remember reading it. And I still remember getting to Hades and Persephone and being like, that's so cool. Like what that is such a cool explanation for the seasons. Like genius. And the thing about me is that when I like love something, it's not lightly. So Greek mythology kid just grew up into Greek mythology adult. Like I'm not really good at like growing out of things. And so every time I used to like sit down and try to write something, it would be like a little Greek mythology inspired. I think it just felt right and natural to do that as I was like starting out. And then when I was writing Persephone, I like to call it Greek mythology themed because it's not a one-to-one direct retelling, right? I don't have like a Demeter figure, for example. As I was writing it, I could have probably told the story without the Greek mythology flavoring, but it also didn't feel like that worked as well. It felt like more fun. And I know that people are so enticed by like Hades and Persephone the way I am. And I think the appeal of it is kind of probably what it like draws us to like Beauty and the Beast, right? It's like two characters who are like different from each other, but also weirdly on the same side of the different sides of the same coin. Yeah. So for me, it just felt like it was always going to be Greek myth inspired. And also because I think your debut should just be like as much of a love letter to yourself as possible. So I was like, well, what would I have wanted to read like when I was like really in my Greek myth phase, or maybe when I was a teenager? And so that's why I wrote this book.
I love that. Did you always interpret the Hades Persephone story to be a romance, or did that come after you got into romance?
I always interpreted it to be a romance because, well, for one thing, because the first version I read of it was so sanitized because it was so child friendly. So in my mind, I was like, this is Beauty and the Beast, right? Which I also love. And then as I grew up, obviously, I was like, okay, well, I don't think I had all the details of this particular myth. But, and I think certainly you could read the myth and take it in a non-romantic fashion. But being somebody who loves romance and has always just like leaned toward romantic stories, I was like, I'm gonna read it. You know, I can read it as romantic and there are interpretations that are romantic. And so I guess it's really up to the readers, like how they want to take that myth, because it can definitely go both ways. But I always found it a little bit romantic in that like Beauty and the Beast type way, right? She may not necessarily want to be there at the start, but then they like can slowly fall in love.
Yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think one of the great things about writing with this Greek mythology flavoring, as you said, is that we've had the Greek mythology flavoring in a lot of different media for millennia now. So there are a lot of, as you're building your illusions, it makes the text really rich. So were you influenced by any of other retellings? Like I'm the one that jumps to my head is Hades Town, the musical. Are there any of those that you were pulling from as well?
Not really. I love Hades Town, by the way. I'm a huge musical nut. Like as soon as they came to LA, I like ran to see it, but not really, honestly. I think I was just very much running. I just was taking from what like I like from the
Hmm.
myth and then just like leaving the rest of it behind. Obviously, I like read a lot of retellings and it's really interesting to me. all the different ways that you can like work with one story. So this one does feel like very much Isabella's, where I was like, I'm gonna pick this and do this and leave the rest of this out because I don't want it.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love what you said about the debut being a love letter to yourself, because it sounds like you really got to honor the story that has been resonating with you since you were in fifth grade and started learning about the Greek mythology. And then also got to honor your love of romance and put them together